Okay, let's now look at the third way of turning objects into 3D soft bodies, and that is the tetrahedral approach. So as we talked about it before, what happens here is it's the most accurate way of doing things, and it turns an object into small pyramids. And this is called, those are called tetrahedrals. So to do this, we can just type in tet, or maybe even tetrahedral, and there you go. Tetrahedral, there we go. And then we'll find the Vellum configured tetrahedral soft body. And if I drop this, we get two nodes. And as you can see, you don't need a cloth node this time. It only needs two nodes. And the first one is actually the most important one. And you can see if I connect them, it takes a bit of time. Because the first node, the tet conform, turns my polygon geometry, which is hollow inside, into those tetrahedrals, which you can't really see when you look at the result right away. But if we use a clip, for example, to cut through the geometry, you can see what it did. And let's see from below, here you can kind of see that it's not hollow inside, but it's made of all kinds of small little pyramids or tetrahedrals. And you can actually see that when you middle click on the output, it creates tetrahedrons, it's called here. So I'm probably mixing up the namings, the correct terminology here, but it's small little pyramids. Let's keep it at that. You can see there are no polygons anymore, but tetrahedrons, and 130,000 to be precise. And this is the exact same system that the FEM system uses, which still exists inside of Houdini. So if we quickly create a DOP network, we can actually find that there is an FEM solver that does those kind of calculations. So if you're interested in this kind of topic, you can look into it. I leave the FEM solver out because in the end, this is a fundamentals course. And I think Vellum is much easier to understand, and you can get basically the same thing with Vellum. But if you're interested in the whole technique, you can look into explicitly use FEM as its own solver, but I think that's not necessary for most people. So this tet conform actually is also used for this FEM system, but instead of then going into the FEM solver, we go into the Vellum constraint setup that turns this into Vellum constraints between those pyramids. And then when we put this into our Vellum solver, you will see that it's the most accurate, but of course also the slowest of all three techniques, because it calculates basically the volume of our squab here correctly, including all the energy that is moving through the soft body. And that looks like this. If we activate the collision ground and we run this, you will see it's pretty slow, but also you will see it gives you a massive amount of complex behavior or reactions to the collision. And you can see here it squashes together, but unlike pressure, the squashing creates almost like energy that is then traveling through the object, because all those tetrahedrals interact with each other. And this creates some really fascinating interactions, especially with a complex geometry like the squab. And here you can see that all this, jiggling around and pushing and pulling and turning. It's really quite fascinating. You have not that much options to control the behavior of this tetrahedral based system, because basically what you have is one stretch stiffness parameter, and this simply just controls how rigid everything is. So how much each tetrahedral can change its shape. So if you increase the stiffness, of course, the whole thing just becomes more rigid. And then, for example, with 100 times more rigidity in the stretch stiffness, you get this result. And you can instantly see that there is less bounciness and less squashing happening, because it's now just stiffer. And there you go. While I was caching, you can see that my cache got lost. So it's the classical problem. Make sure that even for Vellum, sometimes under the Vellum solver advanced, under the Vellum solver simulation, there is a cache memory, and this is set by default to 5 gigs. Let's increase that, because otherwise, if it's more than that, it will delete all cache information, and this is really annoying when you just want to test something. So let's increase that to 25 gigs, and now I have to sim this again. So here you go. This took a little bit, but again, as you can see, there's so much stuff going on. So when you look at the behavior of the tentacles, especially, you see all kinds of rotation, and it's really quite complex. So if you really care about the complexity of your movement and want something most realistic, then tetrahedrals are definitely the right approach. It takes by far the longest, but very often it's worth it because you get a lot of really interesting behavior out of it for free, basically, that you don't have to set up yourself because the system is just so accurate. Okay, and as usual, if you want to increase the accuracy, you can always increase the solver sub-steps, but this is really just to show you the basics without going too deep into edge cases. By the way, here's a small, nice little thing. The object itself pushes against another object, and as you can see, there is also a thickness parameter. So if you have a problem like this, where the object pushes with too much of a gap, depending on your camera, you might see that or not, then you can, of course, again, just like with everything else, lower the thickness parameter. Let's lower the edge length scale to 0.1, for example, and then this should be solved. And now with a smaller thickness, you can see that the collision is just closer to each other, and that depending on your camera, that might look better. Like here, you can see it's closer. There's a little bit of jiggling. Again, you will probably be able to solve that with higher substeps. Now, when it comes to resolution of our TET version, it actually takes, as you can see, so this is the wireframe of our squab, and the TET conform takes that and basically triangulates it. So it takes directly the resolution of the input, which means if you need smaller detail, you just subdivide the geometry before it goes in. And then you will see that the resulting tetrahedrals are smaller, which of course makes it slower as well. Now that took a while, and you can see you have now tetrahedrals that are much smaller, at least at the edge areas. As you can see, it automatically uses bigger tetrahedrals or tetrahedrons when it has to cover the insides. And of course, finally, to make sure that we actually use our actual geometry, for this, we can use a pointiform again to just take our geometry and our reference, which would be this one. The TET version is our reference, and then we have the result of our simulation, and then you can apply the simulated version to your geometry, including all the beautiful movement that comes out of it. All right. So that's the third and final way of turning stuff into solid, soft bodies in Vellum, and I hope this is helpful. So thanks very much and see you later. Cheers.